And that's all part of. And some say, "Oh, the kids are the church of the future." No, they aren't. They're the church of today. And kids win kids. And we were sharing with Colleen. You sometimes it's your kids and the grandkids that bring mom and dad to the Lord, or the grandkids bring grandma and grandpa to the Lord. I don't know where it says. I don't know if it's a scripture. It says, "Little child shall lead them," but sometimes that's exactly what happens. A young child can have quite an impact. They'll tell me no, they'll tell you no, but they won't tell a grandkid no. So if we have a kids special, this is something we need to do. We need to have a kids day where the kids do some special music, or a special skit, or a special pantomime, or a special something, and call it Parents' Day or Grandparents' Day. And that'll cause everybody's grandparents to come to see their grandkids do their thing. And people bringing kids and bring kids, and we'll call it Grandparents' Day or something like that. That'd be a lot of fun to do. So how's that for an idea? That'll kind of work. We're going to continue our series in Ezra the Temple Builder. And we are going to be concentrating, I believe, in Ezra chapter 3. Or Ezra chapter 4, verses 5 and 6. Ezra chapter 4, verses 5 and 6. But the eye of their God was watching over the elders of the Jews, and they were not stopped until a report could go to Darius, and his written reply be received. This is a copy of the letter that the Tenai, the governor of the Trans-Euphrates, and the Shethar-Bozenai and their associates, and the officials of the Trans-Euphrates, sent to King Darius. They reported this, and it read as follows: to King Darius, cordial greetings, and the king should know that we went to the district of Judah, to the temple of the great God. The people are building it with large stones and placing the timbers in the walls. The work is being carried on with diligence and is making rapid progress under their direction. We questioned the elders and asked them, "Who authorized you to rebuild this temple and to finish it?" We also asked them their names, so that we could write down the names of their leaders for your information. Wouldn't that be neat that everybody that did anything on this particular church building, we had to take their names and register them with the government to see who you're in trouble now because you've volunteered for a work day? To sand down some closet doors, Chris, or to hang some fence, George, or to put in some sills, Morty? Well, this is the answer they gave us in verse 11. "We are the servants of the God of heaven and earth, and we are rebuilding the temple that was built many years ago, one that the great king of Israel built and finished, but because our ancestors angered the God of heaven, he gave them into the hands of Nebuchadnezzar the Chaldean, the king of Babylon, who destroyed this temple and departed the people to Babylon." Chapter 4, verse 13 of Ezra. "However, in the first year of Cyrus, king of Babylon, King Cyrus issued a decree to rebuild this house of God. He even removed from the temple of Babylon the gold and the silver articles of the house of God, which Nebuchadnezzar had taken from the temple in Jerusalem, and brought to the temple in Babylon. Then King Cyrus gave them to a man named Sheshbazzar, whom he had appointed governor, and he told him, 'Take these articles and go and deposit them in the temple in Jerusalem, and rebuild the house of God on this site.' So this Sheshbazzar came and laid the foundation of the house of God in Jerusalem. From that day to the present, it has been under the construction, but is not yet finished."
Richard.
Yes, sir.
How are you?
From chapter 5, rather.
Am I in chapter 5?
Yeah.
Man alive, thank you for correcting me here. Okay, that's okay. Let's go back. Let's rewind this thing a little bit. Ezra chapter 4, verses 5 and 6. All right then. Thank you, Marvin. How come nobody else has enough gumption to reel me in?
I'm still looking for it.
Cowards! Sometimes Brother Richard needs to be reeled in and set straight. You're on the wrong page, Brother Richard. Wrong verse, wrong chapter. All right. Okay, here we go. Chapter 4, verses 4 and 5. Then the peoples around them set out to discourage the people of Judah and make them afraid to go on building. They bribed officials to work against them and frustrate their plans during the entire reign of Cyrus, king of Persia, and down to the king of Darius, king of Persia. Well, this thought is in the building of the temple, their enemies kicked and lied. Their enemies kicked and lied. Next slide, Sylvia. We read about the peoples round about that went to discourage. Next slide, that began with Xerxes. Next slide, in verse 7, in the days of Artaxerxes, king of Persia, and the rest of his associates, they wrote a letter to Artaxerxes. The letter was written in Aramaic, and then they ended up reading the riot act. Next slide, go. We've read a lot of this. Oh, yes. Yes, I did it. How in the world did this ever get there? But it's here. Some people have to do their jobs. It just says stop work. And everybody caught working goes directly to jail. They do not collect $200. They do not pass go. And Ezra says in Ezra chapter 4:21, now issue an order to these men to stop work so that this city will not be rebuilt until I so order, says the king. And I'm thinking, is there anything new under the sun? I mean, there really isn't. Somebody says the Old Testament is old and the New Testament is new, but the New Testament is 2,000 years old, but it's still called new. And the Old Testament is 3,000 and 4,000 years old, 5,000 years old, and it's still called old. But it's old, but nothing's old because everything's new. Anytime you want to do anything for the Lord, there is a devil out there. And the devil will do things to discourage. And we still know that God's on His throne. All things work together for good. We had a worn-out work team. You count your blessings. You can count your cursings, or you can count your blessings. And I remember somebody got hit in the head by a robber. Or no, they just got robbed. And they says, well, why are you thankful? And he come to church, he was thankful. Well, why are you thankful? Well, I'm lucky, he just took my wallet, didn't take my life. And I'm lucky he just took my money, and I didn't have that much money in there anyway. And I'm lucky I'm fortunate, I'm blessed, I'm not the thief. So, I mean, the guy was grateful. He looked at a bad situation, he turned around for good. If we can count our blessings of being in this location, and start counting our blessings, that if we had never received opposition for starting a church in this community, we would never have been granted a property, an acre property in Jamaica to build a church and a school in Bogwell. Because it was a lady that came to the yard sale that had a friend who was Jamaican, who 2 weeks later were flying to Jamaica, who joined Sister Sandy in the work team that says, I like what you're doing, and here's a property in memory of Mom, and build a church and a school in Bogwell, Spanish Town. And we've got the teams all laid out. We've got the site plans all ready to go. But that was a blessing. I mean, was that on there? And I told the guy there at the city, he had one of those ledger reporters, and there's strong egos. Guys have egos for some reason. Women don't have egos. Guys have strong egos. And I asked this one fellow, I says, are you our advocate or our adversary? He says, I am your adversary. Wow. And then this little reporter from the ledger says, yeah, I think you carry us. I says, well, we speak softly, but we carry a big stick. And the ledger reporter says, yeah, pretty big stick, when he's got Liberty Counsel and 1,100 Christian lawyers ready to come to your defense. And lay 5-page letters on lawyers of Lakeland, drop them on their lap. And I said, well, we're not going there. That's there if we have to go there, but that's not our intention. Because if we had gone to law court, we'd be tied up for 2 years. They'd be dragging their feet, and even after you got your permitting and permissions and all that other, you don't think they can have you jump through this hoop and jump through that hoop and just drag their feet and lose your paperwork and all the other things, because they can sure give you fits. But count the other blessing too. We started knocking on doors and getting people to sign a petition, and that got us acquainted with the manor next door. Began services there. We've had over half a dozen services with 15, 20 people at the manor across the street. And we've not done this one time or twice. It's been over half a dozen times now we've had services over there. And our family here has been able to minister to these folk across the street. And how convenient. They say, well, where do you guys go to church? You see that mailbox over there? Right there, right out your window. Hey, that is neat. But these little old ladies want to sneak over in their wheelchairs, but they can't sneak out without one of the employees coming with them. But one of these days, we're going to end up with a whole nursing home over here and all these wheelchairs. We just have to pull out a whole layer of chairs and have a senior's special day. I don't know. And then there's other gifts that came from a neighbor. One of the neighbors was doing moving to Tampa. And they says, you're doing a yard sale for your missions. I don't want to sell this stuff. We took 4 pickup truckloads of stuff from down at the corner down to here, just generate some funds for a Jamaica mission. And that's another neighbor that says, hey, what can I do to help? And I won't tell you about the $2,000 check that another neighbor gave us. Says, we appreciate what you guys are doing in this community, and here's a blessing to the church. That paid for the carpeting. I mean, wow. Blessing, blessing, blessing. Though anytime there are certain casualties. There's certain people say, I don't like the controversy, I don't want to be around a controversial church, and we just don't, we want everything to go slicky smooth and sweet, and everything's got to be warm and fuzzy, things cannot be cold and prickly. Well, if you've been around our leadership long enough, we can be cold and prickly. The atheists love us very, very much. How many read in the front page of the Lakeland Ledger, the lawsuit against the prayer at the city council was dropped? Guess whose name was among the other 25 preachers and priests and rabbis on that lawsuit? Moi. Yes, by name. Mentioned once by name and once by inference. Remember when we made that speech, not in our town? We don't want a bunch of folk coming in from out of the city that are paid employees of an organization to just keep things in a stir and keep things in a mesh and keep things in a mess. And the only reason they came down into our town is to get offended. They're not living here getting offended. They come from out of town just to come to one of your meetings. Oh, I am offended. Therefore, discontinue your prayer in Jesus' name because it offends me so severely. Count your blessings. But that was the last chapter of the book, I'm thinking, and bam! I think. And then we go into the billboard campaign. We put up a billboard to contend 2 years ago. We did not realize that billboard number 62 and 63 are going up the next 2 weeks. I'm serious. Billboard 62 and 63. We're out of money. We're broke as far as that's concerned. But every time we turn around, God says, Tim, can you put some cabinets in me and I'll hang your billboard, He is risen, over there in 1792? Yeah, I can do that. And a lady who owns a billboard company is putting up 3 billboards. And that one billboard that they're putting up, and this is Tim's idea, that wasn't mine. What hinders you from being baptized?
Yeah.
I mean, you talk about clopping somebody in the chops with conviction and doctrine. That's the doctrine of the death, burial, and resurrection of Jesus Christ in that message. Wow. Except you believe, you may. I mean, these are some of the little things that have erupted from, and this church is actually an outgrowth of that atheist billboard that was across the street from the Baptist church. Because I was teaching Greek at the seminary, and whenever they put that board up there, I took it as a personal offense. It says, they're attacking my friends. And I'm going to do something about it. And we did something about it. And we said, okay, now how are we going to pay for it? $200 a month for the next 2 years. The bill was $4,700 and change. 3 days later, Kathy Hall calls me up and says, were you praying? I says, what? Were you praying? I says, what? Were you praying? I says, what? I'm asking you, were you praying? I says, what are you asking? What are you doing? Get to your point, Kathy Hall. And she's about up to your armpit. She's a tiny little sales girl for Lamar. She says, Lamar says, all you got to do is pay the $750 for the vinyl and the installation, and they're going to waive the other $4,000 and just make. I said, well, what about that digital over in Comby Road we ran for the weekend? That's another $250, $300. Oh, they're waiving that too. What happens when you have Roman Catholics give you $4,000 worth of free advertising?
You accept it.
You say, thank you very much. But then Kathy calls me the next day and apologizes. Well, Richard, I forgot to tell you that if it rents, we're going to have to move, and we move, it's going to cost $250, and I didn't tell you that, and I tried to get them to do that for free. Now, I hope you don't know, said, Kathy, all day long, you know, you get forgiven $4,700, somebody comes back at you with $250. You said, thank you very much. And 5 months later, it moved over to Auburndale for $250, and so that $4,700 spot was up there for another 7 months. So the board was up there over a year. And that's only board number 1. And each of them has their own story about the prayer board that was across from Cypress Gardens, Legoland. And the board that went up there over between the Red Lobster, and how we got everybody out on a Sunday afternoon. We got a bucket truck, and we got 10 guys and 4 chainsaws, and how we trimmed the treetops 2 Sunday afternoons working on the Sabbath anyway, and hoping everybody said, hey, you guys are working on Sunday, you're not supposed to be doing stuff for the Lord on Sunday. Well, we didn't get it, but we thought we might got it, but we did it anyway. So confession is good from the soul. I'm making a good confession. Yes, we were there to work with the guy shoulder to shoulder. And I work behind George. George is a mean chainsaw guy. You get out of his way and he's got a chainsaw. He's good. I mean, he's good. I couldn't keep up with him just picking up the stuff he was cutting. But we got that all cleaned up, and now that board is worn out after a year, and it had do this in remembrance of me, where we're teaching the whole county the importance of the Lord's Supper. Why not? Why not have a gospel message to teach our county the importance of Jesus going to the cross and coming out of the tomb and dying for their salvation? And now that board that's going up there he is risen. And then I go driving around to Lake Wales, and guess what? Wise men still seek him. That's still up. And then I come over Auburndale over the bridge, and wise men still seek him. And I want to tell you the story of getting a camel from Ocala to Wauchula and dressing a guy like a king to get on top of a camel and taking pictures of him. I want to tell you the story about when I say, I need John the Baptist baptizing Jesus. We don't have one. Get me one. I didn't know that I opened up another can of worms, that whenever we opened up that situation, Mike got 6 guys, 3 hours, 350 shots later. He says, here's my best 5. Now you talk about precision, accuracy. This is not a sloppy, fly-by-night, off-the-cuff, get by and wing it.
Not at all.
It is a well-orchestrated work of God that goes far beyond this little church here. And so Tim comes along and says, well, we need to do something bigger and bolder. I says, what's this next, Tim? He says, we want to do 3,120 television ads on 24 television stations to cover 148,000 people living in Polk County. I says, that's going to cost some money. He says, yeah. I says, you know who's going to cut these ads? Well, Bright House is going to cut the ads, and it was over $6,000 to have the professional ads done in high definition. So what happens? Anybody hear Rick Warren? His boy comes on board, who's his IT man, who happened to be 3 or 4 Academy Awards for Christian broadcasting and advertising, who happened to be here in Lakeland, who happened to say, I happen to have the high-definition television cameras. And I so happen to have this, that, and the other thing put together, and Tim calls me up and says, Richard, he asked for $100 for a backup screen to deflect the light and all that other. Do we have that in the budget? And Santina says, all day long. If I can spend $100 for $6,100 worth of high-definition TV ads, celebrate recovery from cancer, a prostitute that has recovered through the grace of God and got off her dope, and now she's saved by the grace of God, a man who was a druggie and a man that was an alcoholic, folks that survived death in the family as a widow, those that recovered and were prayed and for and received God's grace. It's called Celebrate Recovery in the Grace of God. Now, I don't know how many of you folk remember America's Got Talent, but on America's Got Talent, there's that gal that sang, opera singer. Well, it'd be neat to get her to do some music for you, wouldn't it? Well, I couldn't get her. We didn't get her, but we got her twin. Her twin was a little 8-year-old girl, lived down in Texas, a little Baptist girl. Couple years, Glenn, little Baptist girl. Okay? And her name is Rima Marvane. Have you ever heard of Rima Marvane? She just got back from Russia. She only sang to 250 million people on Russian television. Over in Madison Square Garden, they had a full billboard of her as she performed in Madison Square Garden. She's country gospel, but she sings like a 30-year-old. And she's just a tiny little thing. Now she's 9 years old. And Tim contacted her dad. Her dad gave permission. Then her dad asked us permission if he could take our ads and put them on her webpage. He's asking us to put our ads on his webpage. And but this is the dilemma we had. To do this advertising was going to be an $11,000 project. Besides the $6,000, it was going to be a $17,000 project. I had a person put $10,000 in my hand and says, you got three things you can do with it. You can either build your mission up in Jamaica, you can do your building here for the Northside Church, or you can do a county-wide Celebrate Recovery campaign. And Richard, it's your decision. Oh, Lord, Lord. Give me the wisdom of Solomon. Let's cut this baby in half and give this woman one half and the other half. And every one of those ministries, but I thought we need a headquarters to work out of. We need to have some place to call home. We cannot be gypsies and vagabonds living out of our suitcases and transporting our equipment. Every time we got a microphone, we got to carry it from closet to country inn and suites. We can't do that forever. Once we have an established headquarters, then there's no problem sending somebody down to Jamaica, Todd Ellis. Then there's no problem, as far as paying for a billboard. A Savior's born over there. We're still able to do the Jamaica mission. We're still able to do the billboard ministry. And now we have a headquarters because that's freed up monies that can be used for evangelism. And to me, that's what it's all about. Stop work. Oh my. Next slide. The preaching prophets encouraged them, and there's two main preaching prophets. Next slide. And fortunately, we have three preaching prophets. You got to enjoy one for the month. The books of Haggai and Zechariah, these were prophets that preached during this particular time, during the days of Ezra and Nehemiah. And they were there, for one thing, to encourage the people to don't get weary in well-doing. Don't get discouraged just because you get whooped up on the city. And these guys were vibrant preaching forces. And you say, well, boy, wouldn't it be great if we could have a Haggai or Zechariah get into a time machine, fly through the sky, come here to 2012 and preach for a month here in this congregation. Well, guess what, brothers and sisters? We had a Haggai and a Zechariah and Chuck Dowdy. I mean, he is the preacher's preacher. Golden Gloves boxer. Come up and says, Brother Dowdy, I came here to kill you. And Dowdy says, give me 10 minutes before you kill me. And after I get done talking, if you want to kill me, go ahead and kill me. And he talked to him about the Lord. And next thing you know, a month later, as the guys come to church after Chuck baptized, says, Chuck, I'm kind of glad I didn't kill you. But what an encouragement that those preachers were to the work of Christ. And we're fortunate to have guys like Morty, and we're fortunate to have guys like Dan, and fortunate to have guys like Glenn, and just guys like Tom Schmidt. And next Sunday we have guys like good old Kurt Morlock is coming back. And of all the preachers I ever heard preach at the Grove Park Church, he is my favoriteest preacher among preachers. He's the preacher's preacher. Is he as good as Chuck Dowdy? He's Chuck Dowdy plus 10 more years of experience. He's just a super guy. But Kurt's going to share with us next Sunday. Let's go to the next slide. The Bible tells us in chapter 5:8, the king should know that we went to the district of Judah, to the temple of the great God. The people are building it with large stones and placing the timbers in the walls. The work is being carried on with diligence and is making rapid progress under their direction. And I like that. The work moved on with encouragement. It's good to have a spiritual relationship or a spiritual challenge in leadership that they're there for you. It seems like in the new church, what's happening now, maybe one of these days to put a sermon together. I was talking to Marvin, and I says, I'm going to have to preach a sermon one of these days about stained glass windows or chicken coops. And how do they connect? Well, that may be a sermon for another day. But the leadership to encourage the people work shoulder to shoulder. But what happens with the modern church is it's almost like Elvis has left the building. The preacher sits back in his own little room, and then when it's his time to come forward, he's not sitting in among the congregation, he's sitting in his own little room meditating in the dark. And then when it comes on, the lights come on, and you got the timer, and he says, okay, Elvis has entered the building. Then Elvis does his thing, and then when it's time out, Elvis leaves the building and goes back to whatever. And it seems like it's stage on and stage off, and the celebrity, you never get too close to that celebrity because you're supposed to be friendly to everybody but friends to no one. You dare not have church members in your home because they might pick up a magazine or might pick up something there that might be, they may end up, ooh, you know what kind of magazine he subscribes to. We're going to have to tell the whole church about that he subscribes to Reader's Digest or National Geographic. You should have seen what was on the cover. And on it can go. You'd like a leadership that's not so aloof from the membership. And probably one of the best ones here in Lakeland that is a preacher's preacher is Wayne Blackburn. Right, Sister Sylvia? He's not so wrapped up in his self-importance of pastoring a church of 7,000 people that he does not meet with the visitors in a back room because they're visitors and they get to meet with him, shake hands, and sit down. He's a people's person. And he began a little church in Mulberry. And I don't think Wayne Blackburn sat down and says, I'm here, I'm planning to build me a mega church that's going to be bigger than any church in Lakeland. That's what I'm going to do. Yep. I'm pointing myself from God that I'm going to build me a mega church. No, that don't happen. You just do not self-appoint yourself to become a mega church builder. You have to be at the right time, right place, right personality. Here's a case in point over there in Claremont. I was teaching in the Bible Institute over in Claremont. It was a church of about 80 people when we came back to Florida about 25 years ago. The preacher drove all the way down to want my wife to be one of his school teachers in his Christian day school. But she didn't want to drive 45 minutes one way back and forth, 43 miles to Claremont every day to teach in the school. We had our kids here at Lakeland Christian. She wanted to be involved in the kids' doings, the kids' ball, the kids' this. And 2 years later, they're all off to college, and you don't see your kids anymore. They had this youth minister by the name of Justin. But when he was in the youth group, he was the most ornery, obnoxious, grating. Jim Book, every time he came to Claremont, did a youth rally or a youth anything preach, he just winced when he saw this Justin. This kid was nothing but trouble. He was just a major, not a little rascal, just a big rascal, a rapscallion rascal. Yet, eventually this boy grew up. He became the youth minister for that church. And while he was youth minister for that church, the church was 85 to 125. And they'd gone through several preachers, and eventually they decided, we're going to let Justin become our senior minister. He had the right personality, the right temperament, the right spirituality, the right ability in delivering a message. That church grew to 1,300, grew to 1,700, grew to 2,700. They've got a campus now in Orlando. They're opening up another campus in another city. They're talking going up to 4,700. This brat in Sunday school. Yeah. You go figure. It's got to be a God thing. Totally. My daughter's one of the school teachers there at the that academy over at Claremont Christian, over in the Claremont Christian area. And finally, we want to discuss that the work was completed with great joy and great sorrow. The work was completed, building Ezra's temple, with great joy and great sorrow. Let's go to the next slide. We have the joy of worship. I don't know if you know some of these folks here, but sometimes these candid shots, and sometimes you can find yourself in there. And if you miss that Sunday, you might not get in the next shot. You have to commit, whatever. But there is a joy of worship. And that's special. The joy that passes all understanding. Next slide. The Bible tells us in Ezra 3:11, with praise and thanksgiving they sang to the Lord. He is good, His love toward Israel endures forever. And all the people gave a great shout of praise to the Lord, because the foundation of the house of the Lord was laid. And the next slide. But many of the older priests and Levites and the family heads who had seen the former temple wept aloud when they saw the foundation of its temple being laid, while many others shouted for joy. Next slide. No one could distinguish the sound of the shouts of joy from the sounds of weeping, because the people made so much noise, and the sound was heard far away. There are mixed emotions. Too many of us who are older remember the Grove Park facility. We had 1 acre under roof. 1 acre under roof. A gymnasium where you could feed 300 people. You can have 2 basketball games going on simultaneous. And you can have a worship service for 300 people going on, and you don't even disturb each other. You talk about a facility. That was a facility. Now, for the younger families, seeing that, boy, this has come along great. Boy, we got our carpet in, and we got our, one of these days, be able to hang our signboard up there, and we got 1/3 of an acre, and it's not 1/3 of an acre under roof. We got about like 1,800 square feet under roof. And storage shed out here, that might give us about 2,188 square feet. We're not quite an acre under roof. Too many of us remember the old building. And so if among the younger families and the newer families to this church, see some of us old people start moaning and groaning and feeling sorry for ourselves, be patient with us. We just remember the good old days. But I don't know if we want to reenact the good old days. Could we afford a $12,900 a month mortgage payment? Now we're talking about renting a storefront, $2,500 a month budget, just to run a storefront. It's kind of hard to do when you're running about a $2,600 a month budget and you're tithing to missions, and now you got about $2,300 left to operate a church from. You better keep your payments down a little lower than $12,000. Now that building was leasing for up to $15,000 a month. And somebody come in, Brother Richard, why don't we go ahead and lease the old building out? And I says, yeah, okay. You know, we could, what do we do? Just auction off our firstborn, hold them for hostage, mortgage our houses to the hilt, and 6 months later we're out on the streets? You know, that sounds good. But let us rejoice in the things we need to rejoice in. Be grateful for that God's given us a facility that is shaping up. And there is joy. The engineer came to me 2 days ago. He says, I got the good news and I got the bad news. And Lorelei says, I always want to hear the bad news first. Yeah. Not me. I said, give me the good news. He said, I went down there to Tampa. And I told him, well, this is just a little church. They want us to put in a $7,000 to $10,000 backup system so that if the one system went out, the next pump kicked in automatically. So they wanted a backup system in case. And he said, well, this is just a little church, 32 people. And he says, and if the power goes off, you know what we do? We tell everybody, go home. Don't get in there and everybody get in and flush the toilet for the next half hour. I mean, give some sense, you know. Go home. The toilet don't work. The power's off. You know, the pump's not working. We go home. Fair enough? Fair enough. We'll put a porta-john out here if we have to. And so he went back. He says, now let me tell you the bad news. He says there's a $250 permitting waiver fee that you got to pay. I says, we pay $7,000. We pay a $250 permitting fee. I'll live with a $250 permitting fee. So that's so you don't think I'm smiling. I found myself at work yesterday afternoon going out to the mailbox, and I was singing a song, just singing a song. I just couldn't help singing. I said, what in the world, Richard, you got your song back. Somehow or another, these permitting, these inspectors and the engineers and all that other can take your smile off your face and they take the song out of your heart, can't they, Morty? You get whooped up on and whooped up on and whooped up on. I says, how come you're not smiling and singing? Man, I got whooped up on this week, haven't you? And I'd like to get my song back.
Amen.
Next slide. For 7 days they celebrated with joy the festival of unleavened bread, because the Lord had filled them with a joy by changing the attitude of the king of Assyria, so that he assisted them in the work of the house of God, the God of Israel. This is the second temple. Next slide. Not quite to the glory of Solomon's temple, but the younger people who saw this temple says, wow, this is nice. The old people says, yeah, but it's not like the good old days when Solomon built his. Well, Grandpa, get over it. Solomon ain't here anymore, and Solomon's temple's gone, and we're young, and we're ready to say, okay, this is what God has given us now, and we will build from here. We cannot build in the time past, but we can remember time past, but we go on from here. And the final slide.
All right.
Right underneath my feet is John 3:16, written by one of our youngest believers here at the fellowship, Laura. And she was writing John 3:16, and she quoted for it, and I put it on Facebook. For God so loved the world that He gave His only begotten Son. Whoever believes in Him should not perish, but have everlasting life. Dan, she wrote it in the New International Version. Yeah, I'm quoting in the King James because that's the way I learned it. You just have to pardon me there.
Well, that's all right. We'll excuse you.
But the joy of worship, the joy of celebration, the joy of building, the joy of working together to build a church together. There's camaraderie in a new church. Some people do not like the challenge of a new church because it demands more of its members. If two families are gone here, we cut from 30 down to 20, just like that, you know. So everybody never take vacation the same weekend. And that's the same thing too. Glenn's going with me to Jamaica. We got to figure, okay, and Morty's taking off the month of July or June to go fishing up in Michigan. So we got to plan that Morty's not gone, and Jeff's not gone, and Marvin's not gone, and Dan's not gone, and Glenn's not gone, and I'm not gone. But I've got our old friend Walt Milkey. I've got him lined up to preach from 3 to 5 times this summer, and that's going to be depending on our youth minister and internship. But I've got Walter doing some fill-in for me and Glenn when me and Glenn are gone. Got a lot of folk like Walter. They like Walter, so he's coming back by popular demand, and you'll love him. But wow, this is building God's temple. Ezra. The enemies, picking at him. The preachers, encouraging him. And finally, the joy of a completed worship center, and the joy of salvation, and the joy of knowing God's on His throne. God bless you, brother.